I'm dishing with musicians. I'm dishing with musicians. A talk show about history. I'm dishing with musicians. I'm dishing with musicians. Let's take a stroll down music history. There it is, folks. How are you tonight? I hope you're good, because I'm great. I'm aflame. I'm buzzing. This is going to be a great show tonight, and I hope you're tuning in. We've got 5 people already. They've just been chomping at the bit, like hungry thoroughbreds to get in. All right, so tonight's pretty special. One of the greats, they call him all kinds of monikers, and I'll let him decide what his favorite one is, because I've heard of many. The Prince of Roots Music, the Hollywood Hero. I mean, the list goes on and on. So it's pretty thrilling when you start digging into the fold of this guy. It's pretty incredible. But I want to get him on. We don't have much time, so he's a busy guy. He's probably working on 18,000 projects. So we're very lucky to have him on the program tonight. Dishin with Musicians wants to welcome Mr. Deke Dickerson.
Deke. Hey, there I am.
How's it going, man?
How you doing? It's going great. Thanks for having me on.
Absolutely. Nice to meet you. This is an absolute thrill for me. So yeah, lots of 6 degrees of separation between you and I, and it's kind of a, like we talked about in this little pre-meeting we had, there's so many so much of that occurs in this style of music, in this genre, when you start talking about, roots music in general. I book a roots festival in Nebraska, so I know a lot of people that I also attended Ameripolitan Awards, and know Dale Watson and all those guys, and I'm sure you're very familiar with all those cats.
Yeah.
So, well, thank you.
It is a fairly small world in the roots music scene.
It is, and it's kind of become smaller and smaller with more conversations, and the pandemic had its weird effect on everybody, and this show is because of the pandemic, and I've decided to continue it because it's so cool, and I think people get they get a nice thrill out of it. So some good things happen, and I'm sure you can relate. But before I want to talk about your big pandemic project, which we will get to, I want to talk. I always like to go back to the beginning with people, and I like to find out where the threads start coming together, where the love happened for this thing we call music. And you're a Midwest kid.
That's right. Yeah, a Missouri boy.
Awesome. I love it. Is it Columbia that you're from?
I was born in St. Louis and lived. I always call Columbia my hometown. That's where I grew up and went to high school, and my dad still lives there. So that's my hometown.
Oh, right on. Cool. So do you actually make it back there to play once in a while, or do you just call it your hometown?
Yeah. In fact, I was just back there a couple of months ago, and yeah, seems like I play there once or twice a year.
Oh, that's great. Good. That's great. Dad still, I take it did your dad get you into music?
No, my dad always joked that he couldn't even play the radio.
Oh, that's hilarious. Okay, so you had no family music connection at all. You had no.
Well, that's not true. They say it skips a generation. If you go back further, all my family on both sides were hillbillies from Virginia, Floyd County, Virginia, and there was a lot of music going back. My grandmother on my dad's side was a big influence. She played auto harp and guitar and organ and harmonica, and every time you went to her house, she would put on a show for you. It would always kind of culminate in her taking off her shoes and doing some kind of flat footing dance. It was wow. A trip. And then my grandfather on my mom's side, he was a guitar player, and going back even further than that, I've got some real old pictures of great grandfathers and great uncles and stuff playing in string bands. So yeah, there's definitely music in the family.
Oh, there it is. So it's like Appalachian Mountains kind of good roots music.
Yeah.
Oh
Yep.
my gosh. That's incredible. So you definitely so do you remember as a kid seeing these things and kinda going, "Huh, that might be kind of fun."
Yeah, I remember seeing a bluegrass band when we went back to visit the grandmas in Virginia, and they were just kind of playing at a park, and I was just fascinated by it. I'd never really seen anything like that, and that really kind of sparked this interest in old country music, I guess. One funny story, I'll try to make this the quick version of the story, is when I got into music on my grandma Dickerson's side, it was like, okay, well, look, you're the one that's into music of the family. We have this treasured keepsake. It is a Charlie Pool's fiddle. And, I don't know if you know who Charlie Pool is.
Totally.
He was a famous, 1920s. I think he died right at the beginning of the 1930s, musician from North Carolina. And the story is that he came into Floyd, Virginia to play a gig, and he sold this fiddle to I'm going to get the story wrong here, but I think my great grandfather, and they had this fiddle and they were passing it down, and they always kind of spoke about it in hushed tones. And then when I finally discovered Charlie Poole and got into it a little bit, it's like, well, wait a minute, Charlie Poole was a banjo player. Like, what the hell is this? But they did apparently buy this fiddle from Charlie Poole. And I've always wondered, it might have been, I think Posey Rohrer was the guy who played fiddle in his band.
Oh,
I
he
wonder
might
if
have.
he stole Posey's fiddle to sell to get some whiskey, because he was sort of
Oh,
famous for being this hardcore alcoholic. So I always wonder,
oh my
like, well, where did he get the fiddle? And he obviously needed the $10, like right there and then. So,
I thought
but
maybe
I
he
have
collected all kinds of instruments maybe, but yeah, I remember hearing his name. I used to work at the Old Town School
he's
of Folk Music in Chicago. His name came up all the time.
I did a lot of research to see if he ever played any other instruments, and the answer is no.
The
He was a
answer is
banjo player.
that's
He
amazing.
he's kind of famous for being the guy who started the three-finger roll on the banjo.
Oh,
Obviously
sure,
Earl
Scruggs style,
Scruggs
yeah.
came along and took it to a whole nother level, but Poole was the first guy to come along and do that,
So
as
he
opposed to the claw hammer style or the
oh,
frailing
wow.
style.
He was doing a role precursor to Scruggs?
Yeah,
That's
correct.
incredible,
Yeah,
really.
because he died in 1931, I think, or 30, something like that.
It's funny, like the people that get credit for these styles of music, like finger style. Of course, Merle Travis, we're going to talk about him a little later, but
Yeah,
he wasn't the first one to do that either. So you got all these people that sort of, they might have done it in front of bigger crowds and they got the credit, right?
sure. Yeah, we'll get into that whenever we get into the Merle Travis thing.
Yeah, well, here we are. Okay, so I want to jump in because uh, I'm a guitar collector. You might tell. I love guitars. Um, and some of my people that listen to this show are also guitar collectors. I know my father is. He lives in Fremont, Nebraska, which is about an hour north of me here in Lincoln. And I know you've played in Nebraska. You've played at the Zoo Bar specifically, which we
Yeah,
love and adore, the world famous Zoo Bar. And by the way, Pete Waters says we have to get you back. We got to get you back
I
to
would
Lincoln.
love to get back.
All right,
I
we're
don't
gonna
know.
make.
I don't know why it's been so long. I think the last time I was there was with Reverend Horton Heat. We played a theater around the corner from the Zoo Bar,
Oh, the
and
Bourbon.
that's been a few years ago. So I'm
Yeah,
not
yeah,
sure why it's been that long, but I would love to get back there. And yeah, I
yeah.
played the Zoo Bar a bunch of times, and I used to play Omaha too, although that's even been longer. That's almost 20 years ago that there was like a swing dance night they had in Omaha, and I played
Oh,
that
cool.
4 or 5 times.
Oh, hey,
But
if
yeah, it's
anybody's yeah, if anybody's listening out there and knows about that swing night, comment about that because I don't know about that. I was in Chicago for 10 years and I moved back to Lincoln about 10 years ago. So there was a period in there where from like 3 to 13 where I missed everything that went on here in Lincoln, but that sounds super fun. So what got me into that? I was going to ask you something. Oh, because I collect guitars, I want to know what your first guitar ever was. That's what I want to know.
well, okay. So I saw Chuck Berry on TV, and this would have been in the 1970s. I was a little boy, and he was playing a Gibson ES 335. It was
Of
red,
course.
double cutaway, or it might have been an E3 355. Sorry, but when I decided I wanted to play electric guitar, I went to the local music store, and we lived for a couple of years in Blacksburg, Virginia. My mom was teaching college there.
Okay.
And there was a music store in Blacksburg, Virginia that had a Framus ES 335 copy. Now, this was a German made guitar from the
I know.
1950s or 60s.
Right.
And the action was about that high off the fretboard. I mean, it was a real dog. I still have this guitar, and it is a terrible guitar.
Oh, wow.
But I was like, that's like Chuck Berry's guitar. I have to have it. And so, I took my birthday money and my Christmas money, and I bought this guitar. It was $150, and that was really how I first started teaching myself how to play 50s rock and roll, which is what I was into. I was a very weird little 13-year-old kid.
That's awesome. I actually own a Framus 1964 from Bavaria, Germany. Crazy guitar. It's a classical guitar, but it's got a violin back to it, an arch, like an arch violin back. I don't know if you've seen these, but Framus kind of put out some cool stuff, but they also put out a lot of junk.
They're interesting because this guitar, like the workmanship on it, is really nice. The metal parts, like the pickups and the bridge and the vibrato tailpiece, they're really, really nice, and they work very, very well. But I think they had a shortage of hardwoods, even in the 1950s and 60s after World War II. Or maybe they weren't allowed to use it. Maybe the hardwoods had to go into rebuilding buildings from World War II. I don't know what the problem is.
Right.
But Framus made their necks by gluing together these little thin strips of wood. So they were like these laminated necks that had these, 15 little stripes of wood in there. And some of them have survived okay. I've played Framuses that played fine, but mine just warped like hell and just a mess.
Right. Just it's all conditional. Probably just depends on where you're storing it and what it's seen over the years, I'd imagine.
Or what kind of glue the guy was using on Friday afternoon. You know what I
Yeah.
mean?
Yeah, right, exactly. That's amazing. Well, you're kind of like, sometimes I get this way too with people locally that contact me. I get calls and text messages, I found this guitar at a garage sale, or I found, you seem like I've been following you on social media probably now for like 4 or 5 years, and I got to say your threads are unbelievably funny. If anybody's listening out there and doesn't follow Deke, you have to. His Instagram, Facebook page is really funny. Do you do Twitter? I don't know. I don't necessarily do Twitter all that much.
I do Twitter, but it's like whenever I post something, I get 3 likes. So
sure,
I don't have much. Yeah. I don't have much of a mark over there.
Yeah, right. But you seem to have a huge mark on Facebook and Instagram. But your threads are hilariously funny, and not only that, you're kind of like you're a beacon, so to speak, for all these killer guitars and stories, which I love. I'm a story hound as well. With all my guitars have a crazy story, whether it be good or infamous or whatever. But I wasn't planning on jumping into this early, but there's a guy that I came across a story you told. His name was Gino King.
Mm-hmm.
And this story, you've got to share at least a little bit of this, because it's one of the most endearing, cool stories. And you have a few of those from what I remember over the years, but this particular one is pretty sweet. It's really something.
I really enjoyed Gino King. So Gino King was a guitar player from up in Wisconsin who played with a bunch of well-known people back in the late 1950s through the 1970s. He was Little Jimmy Dickens' guitar player for about 15 years. He also toured with Carl Smith and Ray Price and Roger Miller, and he was just a guy who was very well known to the people in Nashville. Everybody knew Gino. Now the funny thing is that the story started because there was a Gretsch 6120 for sale in the San Francisco Bay Area that was supposedly, it was being advertised as Chet Atkins 6120 Gretsch. And looking at it, it's like, well, okay, this is like a 1955 Gretsch. and it's got these custom features on it. It had like a sparkle pick guard and a couple extra knobs. Like, this very possibly could be Chet Atkins guitar. And I asked the guy, I said, what's the story on this Chet Atkins Gretsch? And he said, well, it belonged to a guy named Geno King, and he's from Wisconsin, right? So I remembered seeing this. You've shown it on the screen there. He made an album called The Bang Bang Guitar of Geno King. Yep, and I had seen that album. Yeah, I had seen that album, and I knew that at one time he had played a double neck Mosrite. And so I did a web search for Geno King, and literally they had just published an article in La Crosse, Wisconsin, like the week before, about how Geno King, the famous country western guitar player, was now living in an assisted living home in downtown La Crosse.
Oh my gosh.
And so I called him up and I said, Geno, look, I'm coming to Green Bay in a couple of weeks. Could I swing through La Crosse and meet you? And so I swung through La Crosse, and it was very sad. He was basically destitute. He was living at this assisted living center for indigent people, basically downtown. And so I asked him, I showed him a picture of this Gretsch 6120, and I said, what's the story on this? He goes, yeah, that's my guitar. I said, well, the guy selling it says that it originally belonged to Chet Atkins. And Geno said, nah, I made that up. I was just trying to get more money for it when I sold it.
Oh shit!
So I mean, that was my intro to Geno, and he was such a character. I mean, I spent about 4 or 5 hours with him that first day, and it was just all these X-rated stories of, girls and drugs and alcohol and pills and just everything you could imagine. He just had no filter. He was just telling this incredible story of, his own personal career and who was a nice guy and who was a jerk and who slept with who and whatever. And so, eventually the conversation got around to, well, whatever happened to that double neck Mosrite that was on the cover of Bang Bang Guitar? And he said, well, when he was playing with little Jimmy Dickens, little Jimmy ordered that double neck Mosrite for him as a surprise.
Wow.
And he treasured that guitar he had it for, I don't know, 12 or 13 years. And after the little Jimmy gig ended, he was touring with a guy named Leroy Van Dyke, who had a big song with The Auctioneer and Walk On By. And
can I ask,
so this would have, yeah.
What year did he tour with little Jimmy Dickens? I'm curious. Do you remember?
Good question. I think that he played with him for about 11 or 12 years, and I would say probably like 63 to 75, something like that. And I don't think he's on any of the records, because whenever they would record in Nashville, they would have to use Grady Martin and Hank Garland, those studio guys.
Big hitters. The reason I
Geno
asked
go ahead.
The reason I asked, my uncle toured with little Jimmy Dickens in '58, and
nice.
That was the first time they took the Grand Ole Opry on the road, and it was a very interesting time period for. What was
your uncle's name?
He's from Norfolk, Nebraska. He was billed as the next Elvis Presley in '58. His name was Dick Allison, and
nice.
and he was with a band called the Bromes, and he came out with a 45 that hit big. He had a song. I'm gonna have to. Gosh darn, this is terrible. I'm gonna have to look it up real quick.
I'm gonna have to look that up after we get up.
Yeah, in fact, you might even have seen his 45, because I know you're a collector. They re-released it on a Teen Scene Volume 3, and it was called Dream World of Love, and it was put out in 1960. But on the flip side, Dad, if you're listening out there, I think he might be listening. There was a song called Tiki Love or something Tiki, but it was interesting. The band was called Dick Allison and the Bromes, and on the other side it was Ron Thompson and the Bromes. So they literally, on the same 45, put a different guy's name as the lead singer.
Right. That's
so
funny.
It was really strange. But yeah, Johnny Cash, real quick. Johnny Cash rolled through Omaha in '58. My uncle had the Coolions to ask him to open up and let him sing one song, and he sang one song, but had 4 standing ovations. And
Nice.
so Tiki guitar was the flip side. Dad says here.
Oh, very cool.
Yeah, but anyway, Johnny Cash took him after that and took him on steak dinner and a bottle of wine and took him on the road with him and said, "Hey,
Nice.
you're going on the road." But your
That's
little
very
Jimmy
cool.
Dickens was on that tour. You know, all the Carter family was on that tour. George Jones, I believe, Jerry Lee was on
Yeah.
that tour. But crazy stuff. But anyway, not to interrupt.
Well,
Sorry.
that's okay. So getting back to the guitar, I asked him what happened to the Mosrite double neck, and he said that he was touring with Leroy Van Dyke sometime in the mid to late 1970s. And he said the double neck guitar was getting more attention from the crowd than Leroy was getting from the crowd.
Oh, no.
So Leroy forced him to sell the double neck guitar when they were in Colorado. He was very specific about that. He said, we were in Colorado, and he says, you have to sell that guitar. And so he sold it, and he got, a Gibson or something like that, something much plainer.
Wow.
And so being the detective that I am, I was like trying to keep my eye open for Geno King's guitar. And then all of a sudden on eBay, there was a Mosrite double neck in Colorado Springs. I'm like, holy crap, there it is. It was very obviously the same guitar. It had this bird's eye maple top with a maple strip going through the center, and the back of the guitar, which you can't see from the record covers, Geno had described it as a purple to cream sunburst, which is wild. And
super rare, yeah.
They showed pictures of the backside of it, and I was like, that's Geno's guitar.
Wow.
So and it wasn't that much money. I mean, in the grand scheme of Mosrite double necks, I mean, I think it was $3,000 or something like that. And I know that there's going to be people out there in the audience who say that's a lot of money, but you see people asking, 8 to 12 to more than that. So it was reasonably priced. I bought the guitar, I got it home, and then I thought I got to put this in Geno's hands again, right?
So
I got to bring this back to him.
You bought it.
I bought the guitar, and I had to fix a few things. It was a little bit boogered up, but a good friend of mine, Garrett Emmel, got it playable again, and got the right parts on it and everything. And so then I was heading back up to the Midwest. I brought the guitar back to Geno, and at first I thought I just want to give him the guitar back. But the problem is he was living in this just ratty, assisted living place. I could tell that if I gave him the guitar, it was going to get stolen out of that place. It was just a bad scenario. So the real hero of the story is there's a music store up there in La Crosse, Wisconsin called Dave's Guitar Shop. And I contacted Dave, and he knew Geno. Geno was a local character, kind of a local legend. Sure. And I said, look, what if I brought this guitar back and you guys did a big, made a big to-do out of it and had Geno there, and then you had like a display case for it, and Dave was all for it. He's like, yeah, let's do that. And so I brought the guitar back, and I met Geno over at Dave's Guitar Shop, and we got these pictures of Geno playing it again, and he had tears coming out down his eyes, and
beautiful.
I could tell when I saw Geno again, because it had been 4 or 5 years since I had seen him the first time, that he was in really, really bad shape. I mean, he was in very bad health.
Right.
And so I just said, look, I'm leaving this guitar here. Dave's going to set up this display case for you. You can come and get it out of the case anytime you want. Just come over here and play it, And Geno was thrilled. And so basically, that happened, and then 6 weeks later, Geno died. So it was one of these things that just I kind of just caught right at the very, very tail end of it, and it made me really happy to put that guitar back in his hands again.
But these are the kind of things that you do, and it just fascinates me. And it's my father and I run the Nebraska Performing Arts Hall of Fame, and he started the Nebraska Music Hall of Fame back in '94. But it's sort of blossomed and changed and morphed over the years to a Performance Art Hall of Fame. And I do a lot of work with it, and it's like I don't expect any pay. I don't get any pay. It's a nonprofit. And the stories, though, when you honor somebody for their work that didn't necessarily think they would ever be honored that way, it's a sense of there's really nothing like that. And I got a lot of that vibe from this kind of story that you did in Gino's case. And it was just like, you didn't have to, obviously you didn't have to buy the guitar, and clearly you didn't have to give him back the guitar, but like, what a cool story, man. That's just awesome.
At the end of the day, I'm a collector. I like collecting guitars as anybody else does, but
Right.
it really means a lot more if you can have some sort of personal connection like that,
Right.
and like you said, just shine some glory on the old cats, man, because
Yeah.
Gino had done so much over the years and played with just about everybody, and he was a really great picker too, and
Sure.
nobody
Yeah.
knew him. He was just
Right.
completely in obscurity, and it was really, really sad.
That's crazy
So
that
I'm
somebody.
I'm I'm glad I
Yeah.
was able to throw a little glory his way.
Yeah, man, and especially, like, right to the end of his life, like, what an incredible way to go out, just, like, to be reunited with the guitar. And, I always feel like guitars always have a story, and if they can correlate with an individual that had some success, that's even better. That's
Yeah.
pretty awesome. Now you
Well, and
you and I. Yeah.
I'll just add one other quick thing. When you say
Yeah, yeah.
guitars have a story, I mean, after Gino died, and I got the guitar back from Dave's guitar shop and all that. I'm looking through a Willie Nelson box set book, right? There's all these rare pictures that have never been printed before, and there's a picture of Willie Nelson and Little Jimmy Dickens in like 1966. And Willie Nelson has Geno King's double neck around his neck, and he's holding it, and he's like, he's kissing the top of Little Jimmy Dickens' head. And I'm like, that guitar has so many stories that we
Oh my.
will never know. There's
Wow.
a picture of Willie Nelson holding that guitar. So
Oh my gosh. That's incredible. So is that guitar still in Wisconsin to this day?
no, I got it back from Dave
Oh, you
after
did?
Gino passed.
Okay. So what are you gonna do? You gonna start a museum at some point, and everybody's gonna pay to go through the Deke Dickerson Guitar Museum? Is that what's happening here?
Well, I live in California, and they sell like, tool sheds for $1 million. So I don't think that I'm ever going to be able to afford to put together a real museum. However, uh, I have loaned quite a few of these guitars to museums for special exhibits and
Oh,
things like
cool.
that,
Oh, nice.
and I'm really happy to kind of do it that way, to be
Yeah.
honest, because sometimes if you donate a guitar to a museum, it just goes back in their, the
Mhm.
bowels of the museum, and it doesn't actually get on display.
Yeah.
Whereas if you loan it for a special exhibit or something like that, then it gets seen by a lot of people, and
Yeah.
and so I've done quite a bit of that, and I'm really happy to do that with some of the instruments that I own.
That's incredible. I took a trip to, uh, Memphis, and this is kind of a twofold story. One in Memphis and another in Nashville, but you made me think of Nashville, going to the Country Music Hall of Fame and seeing like all of the stuff that's owned by Marty Stewart. I mean, Marty
Yeah,
Stewart owns a ton of stuff in that museum, and I would almost say that a good percentage of that museum is his. But he also has a ton of stuff in his. Oh, and I don't think it's open yet, but he's planning on opening this second museum in his
yeah,
hometown,
in Philadelphia, Mississippi. Yeah,
Mississippi. Yeah, which I'm sure you've heard
I
of.
I can't wait to go there. In fact, I saw Marty and the guys over the summer, and he said that they were still trying to raise
Yeah,
funds to complete the construction of the museum. I know that they got started on it, but I think it's sort of midway through. I'm not sure if they even know a date that it'll be open.
they were trying to raise a lot of money from the last time I saw. Yeah. So that takes me to this interesting quip that I want to tell you. So my wife and I went down to Memphis. We were invited by Dale Watson to the Ameripolitan Awards, and of course, my father recorded at Sam Phillips Sounds of Memphis studio in 1968. They had a hit song called "No Not Much" on Buddha Records, which I'm sure
Nice.
you're familiar with. Yeah, and so I wanted to go down and sort of see all these places that Dad always told me about, and there's like missing tapes out there, which is like kind of this family folklore. And he never did get the masters from that session. And it was recorded by Sam's two kids, Jerry and Knox. Jerry's still living. Knox passed away a few years ago, but so I went. We went down to the award ceremony. I got to meet Jerry at the award ceremony. He's like, "Oh my God, never in a million years would I think I'd meet you tonight." And it was just this unbelievable experience. But we also got to record at Sun Studios. We were asked to record there, and which was like a dream come true for me. But we pull up to Sun to go just on the to see the museum, and I shit you not, Marty Stewart is standing outside of Sun Studio. His head's in a guy's trunk, and he's buying artwork out of a guy's trunk right in front of Sun. So
wow.
It was just like a geographical location that he was like, "Hey, meet me at Sun Studio. Let's," and he had driven up from Philadelphia, his hometown, and was just parked right there. And he looks over and he waves at my wife and I because we kind of parked right in front of it. And
Right.
in fact, I parked illegally because I'd noticed who it was, and I parked in a handicap spot. And I was like, "Oh my gosh, there's Marty Stewart." And I'm a huge fan, and he just waved at us like we knew each other. And anyway, long story short, we sat and talked for like 30 minutes, and he was just the coolest dude. But I want to ask you about your and I urge everybody listening tonight to, after this show, Google Deke Dickerson on the Marty Stewart Show. It is the coolest performance I've ever seen on that show, and I've watched that show for years. I subscribed to RFD TV to watch it and all kinds of stuff. And your appearance on that just blows me away. Tell me about that experience.
Well, as I understand it, I was a sort of last minute replacement for Glenn Campbell, because Glenn Campbell at that time was going, through some health problems and things like that.
Okay.
And so I really only found out about it, a week or two before it happened. And it was on cousin Kenny's suggestion that they have me on there. And I was like,
really?
yeah, let's do this. And so I remember that
did you know Kenny before that?
I had met him when they came out here. Marty and the boys backed up Porter Wagner in some of his last shows. I think they did a new album with him and stuff. And so I had met Kenny at that show and got pretty friendly with him. But then just kind of out of the blue, it was like, yeah, we want you to be on the show. And I was flying back. I was playing New Year's Eve in Germany. And I basically had to fly back and then immediately get on a plane to Nashville.
Oh my gosh.
And I was like, yeah, well, I got to do it. I have to be on the Marty Stewart show. I loved that show. And just the thought of being able to, to be on it I was going to be in no matter what. Yeah. And they taped that show very, very, very early. I think it was like 6:30 or 7 in the morning. And of course, I'm on California time, which is 2 hours earlier. And I had just come back from Germany. So I remember when I actually got in the studio, like I was like, what day is it? What time is it? Like, I don't,
California guys here.
I was just struggling to just stay vertical, you know what I mean? Because I was so out of it. Once we were done with the show, I went back to the hotel that they got for me, and I slept for like 11 hours or something. But it was also funny because, I told them what I wanted to do. And Kenny and I ran through the song the night before when I got into the hotel, and we didn't have a chance to rehearse with the band, and I'm thinking, wow, this is just going to be on the fly. And I said, well, what if we screw up? They said, well, if you really screw up, we can do it again. But, let's just see how you do. And so, they called me on the set in the middle of the show. Let's do this song. And we played the song, and we did this, switcheroo thing where everybody kind of grabbed a hand of the double neck at the end of the song.
Yeah, you guys are all three playing the guitar at the same time.
Yeah. And of course, those guys are so damn good. It was completely flawless. And and then it was over, and it was over quicker than it was like, wow, okay, well, we just did that. So then, wow. And then Yeah, that was a real honor for me.
Yep, I
I
bet.
still kind of get goosebumps thinking about it, but
That
it
blows
was
my
also
mind.
super weird and surreal, like, you know, doing it that early in the morning, being that out of my brain with the time change and everything. And yeah, but it was a great experience. And Marty and Kenny and Chris and Harry, they're just the nicest guys. They've always been super nice and very supportive of me. So I can't say enough good things about them.
They just played Omaha a couple weeks ago, the fabulous Superlatives, and the
Hmm.
place was packed 2 nights in a row. But what blows my mind about that story is that so a couple things. It's that early in the morning, and they have a studio audience.
Yes, although the studio audience was about 12 people. The way that
Oh,
they filmed it, if you notice it, they used a couple of sort of quick cuts to make it look like there was a whole lot more, and there was
oh,
definitely some dubbed applause to make it seem like it was a bigger show, a bigger audience, you know.
oh, wow.
Um, but yeah, the audience was about 12 people, and Dwayne Eddy was in the audience, which was, you know, I had invited him to come down, and he wanted to come down and see those guys again. He had been on the show
Cool.
a year or two before,
Oh, that's
so you
cool.
know, just imagine the pressure. Like, here we are, Dwayne Eddy's looking right at you, you know.
Yeah, no sleep. Here we go. Oh
Yeah,
my gosh. Well, the selection of music is not uh, typically something any band would be able to rock that well in 12 hours. Like that's it's pretty intense what you what you did on the show. That just kind of goes, "Oh yeah, those guys are upper level pro."
totally.
Yeah.
And you know, everybody that they backed up on that show, they did such a great job backing them up, and you know, people that are really difficult to sort of, what's the word I'm looking for? Like, I guess a good example is Jim Ed Brown from the Browns. You know, he did this thing on the Grand Ole Opry for decades where he was just kind of a, you know, schmaltzy, middle of the road singer. And then when they had him on the Marty Stewart show, they had him reprise his hit from the mid 1960s, Papa Top. And they started playing it, and it sounded exactly like the original record. And I thought, those guys are geniuses to have Jim Ed Brown on the show and have him do Papa Top. That was so
Oh,
good. But, you know, every episode was like that. It was just all
every
so well done.
every single episode of that show is top notch. Yeah, it's just um yeah, Kenny Vaughn, hearing that he, plays at Robert's Western World once in a while, or he'll bop in and just make an appearance. It's like being in Nashville, to me is it kind of makes me itchy. But like there's certain places like Robert's Western World that I love. You know, Tootsie's is cool too. I'm sure there's a couple other handful bars that are like still playing the good stuff. But
There's a lot going on in Nashville these days. It's a really happening town.
yeah,
It's a little bit too much for me. When I go there, it's like you can't find a parking space. You
right.
know, everything's crowded, everything's expensive. But you know, if you were a guy who really wanted to, you know, a young cat who wanted to pursue a career, that would be the place I would go.
Really? So I guess that leads me to ask you what brought you to Los Angeles? They call you this Hollywood guy. Even on the Marty Stewart show, they introduced you that way. I thought it was pretty
Yeah,
fun.
yeah.
So
So you know, it it's so typical for people to put down Los Angeles and make fun of Southern California, and I totally get it. You know, I get why that is, but there's some people like myself. The very first time that I came out here, I just said to myself, "How long until I can live out here? I've got to move out here because this is where I want to live."
yeah,
And I can't really explain it to you other than just whatever it was that I had been looking for in my life. I was like, that's the place where I can live the sort of life that I want to live. And you know,
right.
weather plays a big part of it. Man, I grew up in Missouri, and I just really hated the winters and the hot,
Right.
humid summers.
Uh-oh. Hope we didn't lose you. We may have lost him. That's all right, folks. I'm going to maybe we lost him for a second, but I think what I'm going to do, if we have a second.
There,
Oh,
I think I'm back.
you're back. There
I
you
got
are.
a phone. I got a phone call coming in. It
Oh,
kicked
right
me
on,
off.
man.
Sorry about
Oh,
that.
no worries, no worries. Okay. So
But
yeah, so the winters in
but
Missouri aren't your cup of
yeah,
tea.
and the other thing about Los Angeles is that when I was touring around in my teenage rock and roll band, we went to New York City, and I really liked New York City.
Oh, cool.
But everybody I knew there worked 3 jobs and lived in a apartment that was like the size of a shoebox.
Yeah.
And when I came out to Los Angeles, it seemed like nobody had a job. Like, well, wait, how does that work? Like, all these people are just kind of gadabouts. Like, they're just like, and I'm like, so I'm in Missouri and I'm like, man, I have to move to, New York or Chicago or Los Angeles. And I just literally thought, nobody seems to have a job in Los Angeles. That sounds like a great place.
Sounds like a
So,
place to be.
yeah, and it took me a few years to sort of get my footing and be able to do it, but I'm glad that I did. I still like it out here, and I really
Yeah.
have no desire to move anywhere else.
Well, not only have you had, managed to figure out how to get your songs on movies, I've read, and you work with
Yeah.
Johnny Knoxville, and
Hmm.
you seem to be the go-to guy for that too. If somebody wants a song written, maybe or something, that's awesome. What a great get.
Well, and one of the things that I've learned is that the only way you can make any real money playing the kind of music that I do is getting it in a movie or on a TV show. And so
Oh,
that is definitely one of the reasons that I have stayed in Los Angeles is just for those kind of things. And I've been
yeah.
very fortunate to get quite a few things in Johnny Knoxville movies, and just had a couple of songs in the new Jackass Forever movie this year,
Oh, that's
and
sweet.
so yeah, the mailbox money, the royalties and residuals from those things, that's what really makes the decision for me. I'm sticking out
Yeah.
here.
So can I ask you without picking too deep into that? Because I'm always curious. I love, I've been a songwriter my whole life, but do you think it's because you're in LA, or do you have a publicist that works for you?
I don't have a publicist. LA is one of these places where it's like you got to know somebody and
Yeah.
they have to recommend you, and that's
Right.
kind of how it works.
Right.
And I think Nashville is the same way too. It's all just
Sure.
this kind of interconnected network of thing. And so I've been fortunate that people who, let's say, they want an authentic honky tonk or country soul or rockabilly thing in one of their TV shows or movies, there'll be somebody around that says, "Oh, you should see this Deke Dickerson guy. He can do something like that for you."
Right.
And I'm not sure how much opportunity there is for our type of music in the movies and TVs, but I've been very grateful for the things that I've been able to do.
That's incredible, man. Well, I urge everybody to go dig deeper into Deke's, to dos and what he's done. But I want to. We don't have a lot of time with you, so I'm going to be very cognizant of where we're at time wise. I know you're currently in the process of selling gear or something of the sort. But
Well, we gotta talk about the Merle Travis book.
I know that's what I want to get into. The Merle Travis book is the hot item that just came out. It was on pre-order forever. I threatened to pre-order one myself, and then I think it was maybe you told me to wait. I can't remember. But then this is crazy. I want to tell you really quick about this local connection, and you might get a kick out of this. A local DJ. His name's John Wagon Master Schmidt. He's been a DJ at this radio station called KZUM here in Lincoln, Nebraska. And they don't call them DJs, they call them programmers, but
Yeah,
he's been a programmer for 40 some years. It's incredible. But we just inducted him into the Hall of Fame last year, and he's such a cool
nice.
cat, big Western swing dude, huge fan of your music. And I asked him today, I said, "Hey, man, I got Deke on the show. Is there anything you want to ask him?" And he goes, "Well, I just bought his book and I just kind of perused through it. I haven't read much of it, but he said, this is crazy. Lots of great photos, including Katie Ray's Aunt Bunny. Does this ring a bell to you?" So there's
Bunny Ball? Huh.
so there's a local guy here in Lincoln. His name's C.A. Waller. He's a guitar player, really
Uh-huh.
great guitar player, by the way. His wife is Katie Ray, and her Aunt Bunny is mentioned in the book in a photo. And I'll read real quick at the bottom of the photo. It says, here's a picture of Aunt Bunny at Merle's homecoming show in Ebenezer, Kentucky in 1956. Merle and his special guest Gene Autry greet Bunny Mullins Baugh, who used to host Merle at the pickin' parties at her house in Ebenezer, where Merle was a boy. And I just found that to be fascinating. That's actually her aunt.
That's
So
wild.
yeah, super cool. But anyway, tell us about this book. And I know you've always been a big fan of Merle Travis, as have I. I love all of his music. I'm a big Birds fan. I Am a Pilgrim was on the Sweetheart of the Rodeo album. I mean, the stories that branch off from him are just maddening. But how did you get into this whole thing?
Well, as you mentioned, I was a fan, being a guitar player and a country music fan. Of course,
Right.
I loved Merle Travis. And over the years, it sort of occurred to me that it was very strange that there was not a Merle Travis book.
Okay.
Um, because he was known for being like a great writer. Of all the country music stars, I can't think of any who actually had this reputation as being a great writer. And he would, write magazine articles and stories and things like that. And
Oh, really? Okay. Uh-oh, he froze again. I also know Merle Travis was a great cartoonist, and which I love to cartoon things. Hopefully, we can get Deke back here. His phone is refreshing. There he is. Is he
there
back?
he
Yeah.
is.
Awesome.
I'm not sure where I got cut off, but
So you said he was a good writer, but I then said he was a cartoonist, which I know that about him too. That's incredible.
so I thought it was strange that he never wrote an autobiography. And all these years later, I ran into his two daughters that lived out here in Southern California, Merlene and Cindy Travis.
Oh,
And
okay.
I said to them, there needs to be a book. How come there's not a book? I said, I want to write the book. And so we kind of stayed in touch for a year or two. And Cindy had been going through all the stuff that Merle had when he died, which was a lot of stuff, a lot of photos and memorabilia and letters and everything else like that. And finally, she asked me, do you want to come to Santa Barbara and look in this storage space? I was like, yes, of course, I do.
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
she had done a very good job of organizing, because I guess it was literally like in grocery bags and boxes and stuff before,
Oh,
completely unorganized.
taken out
She
of
had
his
done
house? Is it just stuff
so
removed from
when
his?
he died in 1983, his widow at the time kept it for another 10 years until she died. And then when
Oh,
she
okay.
died, Merlene and Cindy drove out to Oklahoma, brought it all back to California, and put it in this storage unit where it basically stayed for another 30 years until
Oh my
Cindy started
God.
organizing this stuff.
Wow.
But, you know, nobody had ever seen this stuff, is what I'm getting at. It was all pretty much unpublished. And Cindy reported to me, like, look, there's some autobiographical writing in here. You should come take a look at it. It was all raw, unedited. It wasn't complete or anything, but there was about 80 to 100 pages of Merle Travis autobiographical writing. And so I took that to Scott Bomar at BMG Publishing, and I said, there needs to be a Merle Travis book. He's a country music Hall of Fame guy. He wrote all these famous songs like 16 Tons and Dark as a Dungeon. He had his own guitar style that bears his name. And we
Right.
found 80 to 100 pages of autobiographical writing. And Scott has been a really great guy to work with. He just said, yeah, this needs to happen. Go do it. And so I just started working on it. And the way that it's put together is kind of unusual. It's sort of part autobiography and part biography. And the way that I set it up was like, look, we're just going to tell the complete story from top to bottom. And Merle's writing was real sort of spotty and just kind of covered from here to there, but not the whole story. So I just put all of Merle's writing in there and then just fleshed it out with my own writing to make this
Okay.
480-page book.
480 pages.
Yes.
Wow.
Yeah.
I was gonna say, like, yeah, what else was in the storage unit? What Was there instruments? Was there like clothing?
Well, considering the fact that Merle was a very bad alcoholic and he had been married 5 or 6 times and moved a whole bunch of times, it's
Oh,
kind
okay.
of incredible that he saved all this stuff. But there was a ton of stuff. There was, thousands of photographs, thousands of letters, thousands of, show posters, little cards and matchbook covers and all kinds of different stuff to pour through. And yes, they still have a couple of guitars, a couple of amplifiers, Western suits, and so just seeing all that stuff was completely mind blowing.
Wow. That is absolutely incredible to be say, "Hey, come look through the guy's personal stuff." How crazy is that?
And even weirder is, at this stage in the game, it's kind of like late period for any of this kind of stuff being discovered for the first time.
Right.
So, most of that stuff has already been hashed through in the 70s and then redone in the 90s. And then if something's coming out now, it's like the third time around. But this stuff had never seen the light of day. So it was really, really exciting just from kind of a music archaeology standpoint.
Right. So were his kids sort of did his kids sort of filter some of it before you saw it, or was it the first time that both of you were seeing it?
They didn't do anything with it for almost 30 years. It just sat in the storage unit, just
But they
completely
didn't look
untouched.
through it or kinda nose
But
through it?
as I mentioned, Cindy started going through it in earnest for 3 or 4 years, just trying to organize it and see what was
Okay,
there. And
okay.
this kind of paralleled at the same time that I was bugging them about getting a book together. So it all kind of worked out in a very good way. It came together, as they say.
So, friend of mine, Rick Peters, Rickabilly, he calls himself, he's another programmer on the station. His copy arrived today. Can't wait to read it. A gal
Nice.
named Twyla Twang says, "What a treat. Thanks, Mike Simrod and Deke Dickerson. Awesome." Let's see. Rick also said something earlier. He said, "The last time I saw Deke at the zoo, Cialis the gorilla was playing bass. Plus, the bourbon show was in April of 14. Way too long. That was the last time he played Lincoln." So,
Yeah, so we had a guy in a gorilla suit playing bass for us on a
oh,
tour,
nice.
and we called him Cialis the Rockabilly Gorilla. And
Cialis.
we were shooting a documentary or a rockumentary, as you
Oh,
may call it,
okay. Sure.
and we shot this hilarious scene where Cialis did not want to play the zoo bar because he thought it was an actual zoo and he would be put in a cage.
Oh,
So
no.
we've got this
Is this
scene.
is this
He's
available for viewing?
Yeah, you can see it on YouTube. It's in like 10 parts. Just
Oh my god.
Google just Google Deke Dickerson documentary 2013 or 14. I can't remember when it
Oh
was.
my
I
gosh, I
actually
can't.
I think it was longer ago than that. I think Cialis was 2011. It was a
Okay.
long time ago.
Oh my gosh, I can't wait to dig into that. That's incredible. So so the pandemic in a way was sort of a, oddly, it was sort of a blessing for you that you got to focus on this book, right?
Well, so we kind of signed the deal and the contract and all that in 2017.
Okay.
2018 was the year that I did all the research. I made several trips. I interviewed about 70 people, including half a dozen people in their 90s who have all passed away now.
Oh my
Uh,
god.
you know, I went to Kentucky and Nashville and Mississippi and Arkansas and met all these people and Ohio. Met these people that had known Merle Travis or who had stuff that would be good for the book. 2019, I started writing the book and I got it kind of in skeletal form. But then when the pandemic happened in 2020, basically the first 3 months where we were all kind of stuck at home, not doing anything, and all my shows were canceled, I
Right?
just sat down and I just finished that book and I got
Wow.
it done by May or June in 2020. And so, yeah, it was actually fortunate that I just had 3 months with absolutely no distractions where I could just sit down and finish the book.
That is crazy, man. Wow. Nobody really has a blessing in that type of situation, but for you it seemed to work out great. That's
Well, and
nuts.
so, as I mentioned, after I turned it in May 2020, then there was almost 2 years, year and a half basically, where it was just kind of in limbo. Like the publishing company wasn't putting anything out. We weren't really sure if it was going to come out or what was, what the whole world of print books was going to be after the pandemic.
Oh, wow.
They canceled a bunch of their book orders. I heard that. So I was really worried that they were just going to cancel this after I'd put all this work into it. But
Oh, sure.
finally, last year, it was like, okay, we're going to print and we're going to put it out as a, Amazon pre-order. Oh, great. This is going to be great. And then that's when we found out that there was this worldwide printing shortage, with supply chain issues and the whole bit. And so that delayed the printing of it at like another 9 or 10 months, something like that. So
Wow.
after all that happening, the book is finally out. It just came out last week, November 22nd.
That is outrageous. And, of course, everybody's heard about the shortages and the vinyl, even with vinyl records, it's hard to even, so many people wanting printed, and there's just not enough people printing and books.
The craziest story about the book is that, it was going to be a hardcover book. And apparently Amazon bought every single printing facility in the world that makes cardboard to make cardboard boxes to ship Amazon products.
Oh,
So they make hardcovers for books out of cardboard, right? So
okay.
it's like all of a sudden, all these people that used to print hardcovers for hardback books, they're like, no, man, we're printing boxes for Amazon. So I know that in the end, just to get it done, that they wound up having to go with like one printer to get the hardcovers printed, another printer to get the glossy photo pictures printed, and then another printer to print the text and then bind it all together. It was totally crazy, but
Oh my
it's
gosh.
it's it's nice to kind of have that in the rearview window.
Yeah, you Frankensteined it together. Is there any way somebody could get a signed copy of the book?
Yes, if they just go to my website, dekedickerson.com, and that's
Okay.
DekeDickerson.com.
Okay.
Right there on the header of the front page is you can click a link there and buy a copy from me, and I will autograph it, and we'll
Okay.
get it to you before Christmas.
Hey, there you go, man. Awesome. That's great. Real quick, I just have a few more minutes with you. I know this
Sure.
this is so cool, man. I really appreciate you doing this tonight, and what a great experience this has been. But I do want to talk a little bit about your guitars. I know we haven't really got into that, and we don't have a lot of time, which is silly to say to Deke Dickerson. We don't have a lot of time to talk about guitars, but I do want to mention Hallmark Guitars, a really cool kind of smaller boutique company.
Yeah.
Um, uh, a guy named Bob. Now,
Yeah.
Bob is he's a pretty cool cat. Um, funny enough, I talked to him. I talked to him this morning. Funny enough, his name's Bob Shade. I called him because my father bought a guitar from him recently, kind of a Mosrite version.
Hmm.
Uh, that he had been. My father had been looking for a Mosrite for years, and then came across these guitars. And funny enough, you had a guitar made by him. Now this is the Model 2. From my understanding, he made you the first model. It's definitely different than this version. Um, but just a little bit on these guitars. How did your relationship with Hallmark come to fruition?
Well, I've known Bob for a long time, basically just through being fans of Mosrite guitars. And when he started the Hallmark company, I want to say around 2003 or four, the first things that he was doing was reissuing some of these obscure Bakersfield era guitars from the 1960s, like the Hallmark Swept-Wing and the Grugget Stradette. And I thought those were really cool. And I also thought that they were really well made and sounded great and played great. And so I said, look, man, let's do a Deke Dickerson model guitar because I have a really good idea. The first model that we did was basically if you took a Joe Maphis double neck and you turned it into just a single neck guitar.
Oh, sure.
Funny enough, Mosrite had never really done that. They had they had made a Joe Mapes model guitar, but it was very plain. And the whole idea with this Model 1 was that it was going to be this flashy guitar with this armrest and this inlaid pick guard and this headstock with all this inlay on it. So it would kind of look like Joe Mapes' original Mosrite double neck, but just as a single 6-string guitar. And that was very well received. You know, we sold quite a few of them. But it was a little bit expensive, and it was kind of hard to make because of all the inlay and all that. So I know we don't have that much time, but you can see the picture on your screen of Buck Owens and Don Rich.
Yes.
I stumbled across this guitar, and I knew I had seen this guitar somewhere. It was a Mosley. It was like a 1969 Mosrite, but it said Mosley on the headstock.
Mosley.
And I bought the guitar, and I said, I know I've seen this guitar somewhere. It was not like a standard model. It was very definitely a one-off Mosrite guitar. And after a couple hours, I'm like, yes, I know where I've seen this guitar. And I got out my DVD of the first episode of Hee Haw from 1969. And there's a clip of Buck Owens and Don Rich doing Johnny Be Good on the very first episode of Hee Haw.
Wow.
And Don Rich is playing that guitar that was in my living room. And I'm like, God. There it is. There's the one-off Mosley thing. And make a long story short, I traded that Don Rich guitar to the Buck Owens people for Speedy West's Bigsby pedal steel guitar. That's a whole nother story in itself.
You're kidding.
But I didn't have the Don Rich guitar anymore, and I proposed to Bob. I said, what if we make like a version 2 of the signature model guitar, but it's more like this guitar that I just found that belonged to Don Rich. It's kind of like a Telecaster meets a Mosrite. It's more stripped down. There's not so much fancy stuff and inlay. And by doing that, we were actually able to get the price point right around $1,000. So we've been very successful with those, even more so than the first model. And I'm hoping to get another batch of them to sell this year.
That's incredible. Speedy West and Jim Bryant. I'm sure you're a fan of the 2 guitar country style albums they put out are just outrageously cool. And what a cool, like 6 degrees of separation there with guitars. That's so crazy.
It's a small world, man. And you know, the whole reason why I started collecting some of these historic instruments is because I just kind of thought, like, man, some of these guitars just need a caretaker for, you know, the next 20 or 30 years. They need somebody to make sure that they're preserved, not messed up. And for example, this Speedy West Bigsby steel guitar, it was found in a trash lot in Bakersfield without a case. And a guy came into Buck Owens' offices and said, hey, if any of y'all want a steel guitar, there's one in this trash lot outside of town. And so Buck and his guitar player after Don Rich, Terry Christensen, I think is his name, they drove out to this trash lot and they said, oh, it's a Bigsby steel guitar. And they brought it back and put it into deep storage.
Did they know who she was?
No, because the plate that had originally been on it that said, you know, custom made for Speedy West had been taken off.
Oh, wow.
And the reason it wound up in a trash lot is because it had been stolen from a guy there in Bakersfield who had it after Speedy. And so anyway, long story. But the guitar was just in horrible condition. It had been stored outside in Bakersfield with no case, right? So it had been rained on and in the sun and everything else like that. It had splits in the wood and it was just a mess. And, you know, of course, once I identified, like, that's Speedy West steel guitar, you know, I was like, we got to restore that thing to where it looks like it came off the showroom floor in 1948, you know, and so that to me is what gives me the most satisfaction, is just being able to sort of preserve these things for the next generation and keep them out of the trash lots.
Yeah. Well, I'm sure our mutual friend Joel Patterson probably salivated over that story. I'm sure he's a fan of Speedy.
Well, and Joel's got a million great stories himself. He's
Yeah,
a
indeed, indeed.
amazing entertainer, guitar player, and guitar collector.
Yeah, absolutely. And Joel used to walk in the shop when I first started at Old Town School selling guitars, and he would just casually walk in the shop because he was a teacher there.
Hmm.
And unbeknownst to me, 10 years later, he'd be like this, guitar legend. I mean, he's just so revered now. I mean, and the Beatles records he's put out and the Christmas record is unbelievable. And so, yeah, great, great 6 degrees there. That's pretty cool. Well, this has been a pleasure, man. And we didn't really talk about, your studio. Are you taking people, bands coming through recording at your studio?
Yeah, I get a lot of remote work where people send me
Okay.
tracks to mix, or they
Oh, really?
send me their own stuff that they want me to master or whatever. I get a lot of that kind of stuff. But
Oh,
yeah,
cool.
it's available. You can come and record here in the studio if you want to, and it's kind
Neat.
of a mixture of old analog stuff like the stuff you see behind me,
Yeah.
and I also do Pro Tools and new digital stuff because you have to be able to do that when
Yeah.
you're working with the TV and movie people. But
Right.
yeah, I enjoy doing that a lot.
That's amazing, man. Well, we almost need a volume two of this interview, so maybe we can do that down the road. But
Sure.
obviously, you and I have a ton to talk about. We barely scratched the surface on guitars, which is crazy to say, but I really wanted to talk about the book. And where can people buy the book? They can buy it on your website if you want a signed copy. But what's the best place to? I mean, that's probably the best place
You
because they buy it from you directly, right?
If you want it autographed, buy it from me. If you
Yeah,
want it like in 2 days, buy it from Amazon.
yeah.
You can also get it from barnesandnoble.com. You can get
Oh,
it
cool.
somebody was, and now I forgot the name of it, but if you don't want to order from Amazon, there's like a it's sort of like the Amazon for independent mom and pop bookstores, and a
Oh,
couple
cool.
of people have ordered it from there and gotten it in the same amount of time, just a couple of
Oh,
days.
great. Okay, cool.
Right now, I am a bit back ordered because I had a box of 25 books and I put it on my website. Hey, if you want an autographed copy, order here. And I immediately got 140 orders,
Oh,
and
geez.
and which is now up to 193 orders as of tonight. So I'm waiting on a shipment of books from the warehouse in Chicago, but I
Oh,
should still
wow.
be able to get that to you by Christmas time if that's what you're worried about.
Amazing.
But yeah, if you want it like tomorrow or the next day, then order it from Amazon.
Unbelievable, man. Unbelievable. Well, yeah, please do. We've got some mad love from people on the chat for Deke Dickerson. A lot of them are Nebraskans, so we got to get you back here. I'm a booker and a promoter, and I do festivals and stuff. Let's make it happen. You promise?
Yeah, bring me out to that festival you do, man. That'd be great.
I'd love that. Let's do that, man. Well, you go do your thing tonight. And again, Deke, thank you so much. It's nice to make your acquaintance. And yeah, moving forward, let's talk about a volume two. We could dig deeper in the well for
Sounds
sure.
great, man.
Okay.
Thanks again for
Hey,
having me.
cheers, buddy. Take care.
We'll see you.
All right. Well, what do you know? Man, Deke Dickerson in the flesh. Legendary guitarist, collector, storyteller, writer. Unbelievable interview. This is one of my favorites thus far. This is, I believe, episode 14, ladies and gentlemen. The show keeps growing. You can check this out if you want the audio version. You can listen on all of your favorite streaming podcasts. If you heard some references you want to check out again of your favorite artists, or maybe new artists that you didn't know about. There was a lot of names thrown around tonight. You can listen back on those podcasts. This will be up on the YouTube channel with the Nebraska Performing Arts Hall of Fame. Also on Red Rebel. Where else? Zubar. I believe it's on the Zubar's page. So we'd like to thank the Zubar, Red Rebel Media, Nebraska Performing Arts Hall of Fame for sponsoring this crazy talk show I do. And, people seem to love it. So I'm going to keep doing it. And if you love it, let me know. I'll keep doing it. Because what do I like to do? I like to talk about gear and I like to talk about stories, music stories, cool people. That's what I like to talk to. So, yeah, much love, everybody. I hope you enjoyed tonight. This was awesome. Thanks again for coming on the show, Deke. And we'll see you when you come back to Nebraska and rock the house. All right, y'all. Have a good night. See you later. Do I have a closing? I do. Love you.
I'm dishing with musicians. I'm dishing with musicians. A talk show about history. I'm dishing with musicians. I'm dishing with musicians. Let's take a stroll down music history.